Welcome back to 2% Football Camp. I'm Eduardo, Sicilia.
And today we're gonna start a new playlist, Passing Attack. We're gonna start by defining man coverage, as in cover 0, cover 1, and cover 2 men, determine the defensive player's assignments, and how to beat them. In man coverage, just as you can expect from its name, you're going to have the defensive players playing man-to-man against each backfield offensive player. This means that in the passing situation, this defensive player will follow his assigned player wherever he goes. That's the basic part of these coverages, and even though they can actually feature some zone principles, like the ones we'll talk about here later, the man-to-man factor will always be there. First, we gotta mention the fact that the number after each cover indicates the number of players that are gonna be covering a deep zone. So that means that in cover 0, we're gonna have no one covering a deep zone. In cover 1, we would have 1 deep safety. In cover 2, we would have 2, and so on. In the case of no defensive player having a deep zone responsibilities, their assignment is pretty simple. There will be 5 defensive players assigned to each one of the 5 eligible backfield offensive players. The rest of the team will rush the quarterback and try to sack him before he throws the ball. This type of cover is normally used to force the quarterback into a quick decision. If he doesn't, he'll normally put himself in a position to be sacked, as he will usually not have enough blockers compared to the defenders who are blitzing. In the case of cover 1, just as we explained, it's exactly the same as cover 0, but there'll be a free safety who's covering a deep zone. This player normally doesn't have a strict assignment, but will usually move according to the quarterback's eyes. Wherever the quarterback stares at, he'll react that way. His zone principles state that he has to focus and prioritize routes that are attacking the deep part of the field, especially if they're in an in-breaking route. Even though those are his main concerns, that doesn't mean he can't assist on other ones. And last but not least, we have the cover 2 man. Like you can imagine, it has man-to-man principles on the underneath part of the defense while having 2 safeties playing zone coverages. These 2 will divide the field in halves and will also prioritize deep routes. Now, from this cover, we can create 3 variations. The first one is called cover 1 robber, where one of these safeties will come down and take the middle of the field, as in robbing that zone, while the other safety occupies his usual cover 1 zone. There's also cover 1 hole, which is pretty much the same, but now it's gonna be a linebacker who takes that middle underneath zone, which by the way is named hole. And last but not least, we have cover 1 spy, which is exactly the same as cover 1, but there's gonna be a safety or linebacker who's gonna take the responsibilities of being the spy. This player's responsibility is taking care of the quarterback, just floating around the line of scrimmage to make sure the quarterback doesn't scramble. In case he does try to do that, this spy player will go and attack him. Some coaches might consider these 3 variations of cover 1, but I still like to call them variations of cover 2 man because there's going to be the man-to-man factor plus 2 players playing a zone in the back end of the defense. There's 4 crucial points to beat a man-to-man defense. Number 1, once you're sure it's a man-to-man coverage, you have to determine if there's players who are gonna play any zones in order to avoid them, and you have to take into account how they're covering each one of your receivers. If they're 2 backed away from one of them, you might be able to take an automatic quick pass. Or if the corner is playing inside leverage, you might have to consider an outside breaking route. It's also important to remember that we're playing a one-on-one matchup situation, so we need to consider which matchup between our players and theirs gives us the best advantage. Number 2, you gotta determine how much time you have to throw the ball. A play against a cover 1 or a cover 2 man might give you more time to dissect the defense. You have to pay attention to how many players are blitzing you. For example, in the case of cover 0, you have to get rid of the ball quickly. And by quickly, it doesn't necessarily mean a short pass. We'll normally have to look for a route that has 1 or less breaks. This will allow us to get rid of the ball in less than 3 seconds, which of course will avoid the sack. We must avoid complex and slow-paced routes. They must have 1 break or 1 speed change at the most. Number 3, in case of having a matchup and a route that we're almost sure that is gonna work, but that could take more time, we have to buy ourselves some extra time. For this, we can use backfield players in our pass protection. This can result in 2 things. That defensive player who was assigned to the player who we kept on our blocking scheme will bounce around and cover an underneath zone, which we were not going to attack anyway, or the same player can blitz to compensate for the player who stayed in to block. Nevertheless, that means that he will rush on a farther away lane or through traffic. Either way, this will give us a couple more seconds to throw. And number 4, we gotta put the defenders on conflict. A man coverage will put a lot of stress in the cornerback or safety, since they have to cover great distances and spaces we can actually determine. First of all, from our formations alone and our receivers' releases, we can confuse the defense when it comes to their assignments. Now, simple concepts like slant flat can create even bigger spaces that our receivers can take advantage of. And last but not least, we can use the rub routes. These type of route combinations are meant to use the defender's body to cause confusion and maybe even a crash between themselves. Of course, this in order to allow one of our receivers to set himself free. That's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe. Once again, I'm Eduardo Sicilia, and this was 2% Football Camp.